What are some good examples of when there's a big story in the media, look for the story they are trying to distract you from? The time MSNBC interrupted a congresswoman's interview to talk about, get this, to tell everyone Justin Bieber was arrested. I'm so glad this clip is immortalized on the internet so that future generations can see the way our media acted. When the O.J. Simpson's trial was happening, it was the only thing you could find on the news. Even though Rwanda was desperately trying to get help while thousands of their citizens were being massacred. Not exactly what you are looking for. But in 2001, Congressman Gary Condit was suspected of murdering intern Chandra Levy. Everybody, myself included, thought he was guilty. 9/11 then happened and the case was pretty much forgotten. He was just that guy that probably held that girl for another decade. In 2009 they caught the real Krella. Ducking Ebola. It literally just disappeared from the news in one day, I think. Thinking back, I was itching and moaning about Ebola being the only thing the news talked about during the ducking midterms. Then as quickly as it came, the media attrition moved elsewhere and I complained about that too. Because it was over. The disease was contained and people were cured. It was only a matter of time before it disappeared completely. Until the next Ebola outbreak. You know when South Korea or China gets all Japan Haiti? Well, take a look at their internal politics when they do next time. Either a scandal or some unpopular policy is about to break. This exactly the type PF sheet that goes on inside Argentina every time Cristina de Kirchner goes bad sheet about the Falklands. Right now, the FIFA corruption probe is garnering headlines while people forget about the TPP passing through Congress. Edit, I should proofread. Anyone care to ally what's so bad about TPP? The Wikipedia page is a bit too jargon-y for my taste. Extends copyright to insanely long levels. Prevents your own governments from having a sane sheet. Basically forced ISPs to become content police. etc. etc. In 2006, there was a pretty big scandal involving Mark Foley, a congressman from Florida. Basically, he sent a bunch sexually explicit emails and texts to his teenage pages. It was a big, scandalous story. And while it was happening, the government passed the Military Commissions Act suspending habeas corpus for anyone deemed a terrorist. If the United States says you're a terrorist, they can detain you for as long as they want. I can't remember the specific person involved, but there was an infamous example of member of the British government sending out a memo to colleagues on 9/11, telling them it would be a good day to bury bad news. Joe Moore. In 1998, the CIA released a 400-page report admitting involvement in smuggling coke from Nicaragua to fund the Contra-revolutionaries during the crack epidemic in the 1980s. They released this report during Clinton's impeachment proceedings over the Monica Lewinsky scandal. So the report got little to no coverage. I'll never forget this. They were covering the 2009 Iranian presidential election protests on pretty much every news outlet. Just when I thought, wow, people are actually caring about Iranians. Michael Jackson dies. After that all the news was about his death. Legacy. Doctor that held him. Property. Kids. Parents. And Sony trying to milk as much as they can from his name. We go from covering protests in the name of democracy to glorifying a pop star who we as a society demonized as a pedophile right before his death. While everyone in the US was talking about how Columbine was the result of violent video games and music, we were bombing the shit out of Kosovo. Also, they were all going on about Justin Bieber's DUI when Ukraine was having apocalyptic level riots. They talked about a celebrity getting a six changed when hundreds and hundreds of people were dead and dying in Chile from an earthquake. I believe the term you're looking for is, edit, red herring or wagging the dog. And the biggest example I remember reading about this was the Egyptian Elections where basically a guy won whom practically no one voted for, and because of social media people were getting on Twitter and Facebook and saying this is ducked up, and it almost started to become a global cause. Then Michael Jackson died. And also, from what I've read, the overdose of medicine he was given. How did they put it? Basically any first year med student would have known not to administer that much of that medicine, much less a doctor. After he died, it was everywhere on social media and everyone seemed to forget about the elections. I remember that when there was a chemical spill in West Virginia that poisoned the drinking water, Fox News made a big deal about gay marriage passing in another state. I don't even think Fox reported the chemical spill at all. Defense of Marriage Act repeal in the Supreme Court. While the entire nation was focused on gay rights, Congress passed a bill making it illegal to sue Monsanto if their GMOs turn out to be harmful. The FIFA scandal is, I believe, a distraction for TPP or TTIP. Corporations want the same or greater power than governments in courts of law. They use media control because they believe the general public's so foolish to be distracted. In Bowling for Columbine, Manson and Maud discuss that on the day of the Columbine tragedy, the United States dropped more bombs on Kosovo than any other time during the Kosovo War. Whenever there's a story in China about Japanese political leaders visiting war shrines or Japan trying to claim some islands, there were times it's got so bad the public raged and protested it, boycotted Japanese goods, set Japanese cars on fire. I can understand why the public gets pissed since it was on some Holocaust level sheet and Japan has never really owned up to it. But it unifies the public and distracts them from their country's own problems. Valley Reclaim scandal kind of makes me think of this. There was a huge outcry because a journalist outed a covert CIA agent based on information leaked by the State Department. Criminal investigation. Whole 9 yards ensued. What got mentioned almost as an afterthought in the story was the reason Plame and her husband were on someone's sheet list, an op-ed he'd written directly contradicting President Bush's claim that Iraq was stockpiling yellow cake uranium, which was a major selling point for the war in Iraq. Kind of seemed to me like a fraudulent war was a tad more important than the other stuff going on, but nobody really seemed to care about that nearly as much. Just the other day, someone posted a documentary that talked about the CIA engineering the overthrow of the governments of Australia and the UK, and Rupert Murdoch was publishing all the counterfeit evidence of corruption provided to him. The scandals were fakes. They didn't result in any convictions, but they did result in the overthrow of democratically elected governments. A couple months back the English gov got busted for both tons of child porn, sexual assault and selling arms to people who have violated human rights. A couple days later the gov reported on some shady stuff Israel was doing. The thing was, the information implied the English gov was sitting on it for a bit. Remember how a lot of the United States was wrapped up in Ebola coverage right around the time that a lot of our Congress was up for re-election after a term where they allowed the government to shut itself down for a while? Yeah. Every time Bolivian president popularity drops or someone in the government could be involved into a scandal, they start itching to Chile for a sovereign gateway to the ocean. Because they've been convinced for decades we owe them that. Poor landlocked countries that can't improve. Like the underdeveloped Switzerland. Not exactly what you're asking. So I hope it's related enough to not get downvoted into oblivion. In 2006, I remember seeing a wall of Newsweek, might have been Time, magazines at a newsstand in Den Haag, representing perhaps 12-20 countries' different editions. They all had a headline about a Middle East conflict. With one exception. The US edition had Brad and Angelina, or some similar nonsense, gracing the cover. I haven't trusted the US media since. I remember when Anna Nicole Smith died. CNN was going over the contents of her refrigerator and the little news ticker on the bottom of the screen mentioned that one country had gone to war with another. It only slid by once. Never repeated. I remember wondering why that wasn't the main story and displayed briefly on the ticker instead. The Desert Fox operation of 1998. It was during the Lewinsky scandal Clinton impeachment. The US bombed Iraq for dubious reasons and many claimed it was a distraction to let some of the heat off Clinton. There was even a news anchor, can't remember who, that clearly called it desert farce. Seems now that the Lewinsky scandal was a distraction for Desert Fox though. Is there a news website that specializes in calling out the bullshit of the mainstream media and tells us what we should be aware of? Like articles along the lines of here's what the top story is everywhere. Here's what you should be reading about. That kind of news source? I'd be interested in that. Are there any mainstream media companies asking about why the bees are dying off? Considering that if the bees die, we aren't far behind. Just as important as bees dying, bats dying. In even larger percentages. Have you heard about that? Most people haven't at all. I won't call it any sort of a conspiracy, but it is unfortunate. I have a good one. So the entertainment industry is a complex one in Korea. Namely, the government releases gossip to the public. The celebrities are the sacrificial lambs. When it was found the government was embezzling money from the fairy donations, like who does that? The scum of the earth. They released some dating scandals from celebrities. They don't treat dating scandals like they do in America, where getting caught dating someone boosts your profile. Even the connotation of scandal shows how bad it is. No. They have a high moral code for that pop idols, and being caught dating means that they get hounded by the press and condemned by the public for dating, and it essentially could potentially destroy a career if taken the wrong way. The latest one was a dating scandal between a baseball player and a member of a top girl group. To cover up for a $280 million embezzling scam from the former president. Classy. Martin Luther King Jr.'s family's court case against the US for federal agent involvement in his assassination was largely overshadowed by the OJ case. Trayvon Martin and the NDAA. If you look at Google Trends and line it up with the timeline of events, you'll see how there was no interest in the Trayvon shooting for around 3 weeks after his death. Then the day before the vote on NDAA, it blew up and was all the national media talked about. No idea if that was intentional, but it sure was convenient. I'm gonna get caned for mentioning this, but how did you guys miss this? The 9th of October 2001, Rumsfeld says $2.3 trillion missing from Pentagon. YouTube.com. And the very next day, BOOOM. The media TV does not do investigative journalism. They don't even have departments for that. Their news is corporate press releases, so they're trying to suppress information at all times. Their job is to manufacture consent. The premise of the question seems a bit odd to me. Although trivial stories definitely do consistently get more coverage than more significant ones. This is more of a function of scandalous and easy to understand personal stories from one's own country being a much more solid commercial prospect than reporting on complex and ambiguous foreign stories. Overwhelmingly, it's a function of consumer preference much more than it is them attempting to distract us. This will probably get buried, but remember when people were accusing Obama of being born in Kenya and not qualified to be president? They were all demanding a birth certificate. Well, the thing is that he did release his birth certificate proving that he was in fact born in Hawaii. That night SEAL Team 6 shot Bin Laden in the head and Obama announced it on national TV. The FIFA corruption thing is coming at a time when the TPP was starting to get some airtime. The corruption has been going on for decades now, and law enforcement had information from at least 2008 but decided to break it this week. And oh yeah, it also happened to occur the day before FIFA was due to vote to suspend Israel from FIFA for violations, restricting the movement of Palestinian soccer players, destroying a FIFA-built stadium in the Palestinian territories, shooting 2 uniformed soccer players in the feet, etc.